I'm Mbweha. You can call me Ben of Team Relentless, and this is our first ever meta snapshot. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at the data from a recent major event and seeing what we can learn from it. And that's what the purpose of the meta snapshot is. And let's get started without further ado. So this is data compiled from Invader League 7 Round Robin, which just wrapped up. The single eliminations is underway, and this is data that I compiled by hand from all the lists that were submitted. So I think I was missing 3 lists, but other than that, it's got every list. I looked at it, and then the records of all the players who played. So let's jump into it and see what we can learn. We're going to start by looking just at everybody who was involved in the round robin, and then after that we're going to look specifically at the players in the round robin who advanced. So that's kind of our plan here to start with, and then we'll do some faction or some list analysis as well. So starting with the faction breakdown, you can see that there's I'm not going to read the numbers to you because y'all can read, but we see kind of not surprisingly, if you've been keeping up with where things are at lately, the rebels are fully a third of players were rebel, and then Empire being the least popular, and then kind of the Clone Wars factions kind of splitting things as you would expect, a little bit more I guess as intended. I guess if we were robots, it would be 25% in every category, right? So kind of compare these to 25% to kind of gauge their popularity at the time of the round robin this season. So that's where that is. I don't see anything too shocking there. Over here, when we look at the win rate of the factions, again, we're not seeing anything too shocking. Maybe something a little alarming, but I don't think if you've been keeping up with kind of where things are at in Star Wars Legion right now, nothing too surprising. Rebels are dominating the meta right now, and Empire not so much, and then the Clone Wars factions are somewhat in line with each other, with droids kind of coming out a little bit ahead there, but I don't know that that's that statistically significant to have 6 percentage points ahead there for their win rate. And then looking at the 5-0s though, something kind of, well, it kind of stays in line. If we look at, okay, not only which factions won a lot of games, but which ones had which ones were able to go 5-0. You can see that a full 15% of Rebel players went 5-0, and that's real good. But you can also see that droids were in a similar place. So droids and Rebels had a much more success going 5-0 in the round robin than Empire and Gar actually being the lowest, with only one player who played Gar going 5-0. Which is fine, and that's not to say the goal isn't like go 5-0, and if you don't go 5-0 then your faction's busted or something like that. But just kind of looking at like how, when we say that Rebels are doing well right now, they are doing extremely well. But notice that so are droids, really. Right here we've got the average number of acts per faction and the average bid per faction. Again, nothing too crazy here other than noting that droid players bid an average of almost 15 points per list. So much deeper bids from the droid lists than the other ones. The other bids, really, the average bids are quite a bit in line with each other, and the acts overall quite a bit in line, with droids just kind of barely coming out ahead in that average acts, and then Gar being a little bit behind the other factions, which isn't too shocking. Okay, none of that probably blew your mind. I think this next section you're going to find more interesting. So what I did next is I took the data, I analyzed only the data of the players who advanced to single elims. And the reason I did that is I wanted to say, okay, of the players who are experiencing the most success, what can we learn from that? And the data is a little bit different than the data that we just went over. So when we look at the faction advancement rate, we still see an overwhelming number of rebels, but the discrepancy between the gap between Empire and the Clone Wars factions is drastically reduced. So Empire players, while they had kind of a low representation and a low win rate overall, they did a pretty okay job of advancing as far as the per capita advancement rate. It's still the lowest, full disclosure, still the lowest, but it's not as bad as it looks like in the data above. This next one, you kind of got to take with a grain of salt. So I wanted to look at the win rate of the advancing players, and that means that the win rates are all going to be really, really high, right? Because you either went 5-0 or you went 4-1, or in a few cases people went 3-2 and advanced, depending on their round robin breakdown. And you can see that everything is pretty much in line with each other with a just over 80% win rate, except for except for Sys, except for droids. Droids did seem to have a much higher, a statistically larger win rate than the other factions. I don't know why. Maybe bombing run and staps. That would be a hypothesis that I could throw out there, but I don't have the data to support that because I wasn't able to look at the data from the actual, the battle deck situations and who won in that. I didn't have that data. I just had the records of the players and their lists when I compiled this data. Okay, and then over here when we look at of the advancing players who went 5-0, and you can see that the Empire actually, kind of starts to hold its own here as well, and it's really just clones that lagged behind in the round robin for going 5-0 of the advancing list. So a lot of people right now are really down on Empire, and it is true that they are underpowered compared to Rebels, but they are pretty close to in line with when players who are highly skilled with Empire are playing Empire, they're performing at similar rates to clones and to droids. So that's that, take that as what you will. But certainly we can say that Rebels are outperforming everybody else. And that is what it is. Okay, here we have the average number of acts and the bid, and I'm going to scroll up again here so we can compare them. So I'm going to have to drop it down like that. So you can see comparing the average acts across all factions for all players and the average acts for the factions for just the players who advanced. There's really not a significant difference there. I don't think. But the bids are a little bit surprising. I wouldn't have predicted this. You can see that the bids of the players who advanced tend to actually be a little bit lower. The average bid of players who advanced into single eliminations was lower than the average bid of players who didn't. A lot of people have been really concerned that being blue player is like way too powerful. And I'm not saying that's not true, but what I am noticing is that the players who advanced into single eliminations did not have as deep of bids as many other players who did not advance, which is interesting. I don't know if you can hear the stomping, but that's okay if you can. We all have families and that happens. So there's a Stompy the bear wandering down my hall right now who's supposed to be in bed, and that's okay. Okay, those are my observations about the faction analysis stuff. Is basically, hey, you know what, Empire, maybe I guess full disclosure, I advanced with Empire. I was not a 5-0, I was a 4-1 who advanced with Empire. And I do think that Empire has fewer choices right now that are really successful. But I mean, if you practice it, you can win with any faction. But Rebels are doing significantly better than the other factions. Let's look at the list archetypes to talk about that. So this table has been sorted by the advancement rate. What I did here was I classified every list as having certain archetypes in it, because I wasn't going to take the time to actually put into the spreadsheet exactly what everyone's army list was. It's going to take too much time. So I put archetypes in. So if a list had double bus in it, it got that tag in it so I could pull that data to look at it. If it had Lando in it, I put that in and so I could pull that data. This is the number of lists that had the archetype in it, their wins, losses, win rates, and then I think what's most important, the advancement rate. So these are not just the win rate, but were they able to advance onto single elims? Because that's ultimately the goal in Invader League. Round robin is to advance. So we can see that of the 16 lists that ran double bus, almost 70% of them advanced. So this would indicate to me there's maybe a balance issue here. There's probably a problem when double bus is this successful. You can see that also highly successful was Lando, and I wouldn't have predicted this, so this is really interesting to see, in my opinion. Lando was a much more successful commander at helping players win in advance than I would have guessed. I kind of thought he was a jack of all trades and therefore probably not that good, but he's a jack of all trades who it turns out is actually very good, and people are having a lot of success with him, which is cool. Double airspeeder lists, also with a high advancement rate. Over half of the people who ran double airspeeder made it into single limbs, and that's pretty remarkable. And then if you ran some number of Wookiees, whether it be single Wookiees, double Wookiees, or triple Wookiees, which was extremely popular, with 35 lists ran Wookiees. And real quick, I'm going to scroll up to see. That means, so there were 78 total Rebel players. 35 of them were running Wookiees. So nearly half of Rebel players ran Wookiees, which is kind of cool because when they first came out, they really were pretty lackluster. So the changes they've made to Wookiees are making them hit the table a lot, which is cool. But we can say, wow, half the people who ran Wookiees advanced. That's pretty remarkable. People who ran Wookiees had a 60% win rate. That's pretty remarkable. So in general, when I look at the most successful archetypes here, and you notice that they're all Rebel, man, if you're somebody who plays Rebel right now, you're having a good time. You've got lots of good options. I mean, you can run Lando, you can run airspeeders, you can run buses, you can run Wookiees, and all this other stuff that's lower down here too that we see, and be successful. And that's kind of the dream. It's just what we really want to see is that's the dream for every faction, where every faction feels like they have lots of options. And we're not quite there right. We're not there right now, and that's okay. Remember, this isn't. If you're new to the channel, we make observations in this channel. We make observations, but we try not to be like whiny and complaining. So that's for what it's worth. So I hope you can have a similar positive attitude. Triple stabs were also pretty popular. Now, a lot of people were freaked out about how strong Bombing Run was, and I think that's one of the main reasons why people run triple stabs. And it is highly successful, but I think it is very much worth noting that it is less successful than just having these buses and these airspeeders with Rebels. So Operative Luke was extremely popular. 16 Operative Lukes in there, and did really well. Cassian, incredibly popular Rebel, and again, because he's very versatile with a lot of the different things he can do, and performed really well. And then here, the most common archetype that Empire players ran was actually Vader. And again, you hear a lot of Empire players talk about how bad Vader is. I wish Vader was better. Vader should be super good. Okay, well, he is. I'm sorry, the data doesn't lie. That Vader, the lists that were running Vader, the 12 lists that were running Vader, almost half of them advanced. That is literally identical to Cassian. It's literally identical to the lists that ran single bus. So we're about to see Vader get some serious buffs. When Burst of Speed is available because of the Kashyyyk wave, he's going to get better. And then I believe AMG has said he's going to have Compel and like a command slot. And that's going to make him insanely good. So Vader is arguably already balanced with other units that aren't extremely powerful. And I know that might feel like a hot take, but hey, look, the data's not lying about this. Like we can't make these things up. That's what happened in Invader League. 42% of the players, almost half the players that ran Vader advanced. So you know, put that in your pipe and smoke it. That's what my father would say. Think about that. All right. I don't want to necessarily read all of these things to you. You can see that Maul B2s was, I think, one of the most popular things that, again, so let's look at how many players ran droids. Of the 66 players that ran droids, 26 of them were running Maul B2s. That's kind of crazy. That's talk about like a popular list archetype. That's incredibly popular, and it performed pretty well. You know, it did well. It's getting to this mid-range of like how successful were these at advancing. 35% of them. That seems pretty good. Various clone balls in play for clones. Pretty much the only thing that was consistently popular. Now, I should say that doesn't mean that like running something that's not popular is bad. Like, I only included in this list the archetypes that I saw a lot of. So if you're thinking, oh man, I know that somebody ran, you know, this super cool thing that was sort of off meta, not part of this archetype, and it's not in here, Ben, like, come on, talk about that. Sure, that's great. I'm just kind of looking at the, you know, the overall, what are most players doing and what's successful. That's the purpose of the meta snapshot. Okay. Empire also saw Aiden run quite a bit, with eight players running her, and 25%. I'm starting to get down to kind of a small sample size there, but 25% of those players, one of them being me, advancing with Aiden. And then Sabine, quite a bit out of line. So when you look at like the darker the green here, the more popular it was. If you see a darker color down low, that means it was popular, but it wasn't necessarily that successful at helping people advance. So Sabine was really popular, but actually was much less successful than other rebel options, which is interesting to think about. You know, what can we learn from that? AATs were also kind of a little bit less successful than maybe you would think, but like some of them went 5-0, like Luke Cook went, or actually, no, he didn't finish his last game. I got to take that back. Sorry, Luke. He went 4-1. So anyway, and then Bosk having some popularity but very low success, and Veers having some popularity but very low success at advancing. So that's this. Now, some of you right now are thinking, oh, that's kind of interesting. I can learn some things from that, but I want to look at the data. Okay, well, the link to this is available to you. It's in the description. And what you can do if you want to dive into where this data came from, first of all, yeah, you can click on these and see my formulas, and then you'll probably, some of you who are true spreadsheet masters might go, you know, Ben, you could have done this better this other way. And I'm sure you're right, because I'm doing this on an amateur level to try to learn what I can from it and just sharing this information with you. But if you go down to the sheet at the bottom, round RR data by hand, and click into that, you can see the player, all the information that I gathered. So I've got the player, I've got the group they were in, did they advance, their win, loss, ties, the points they got, faction. I separated the list archetypes into primary and secondary, basically for my formulas, how many acts and what their bid was. And what you can do is, if you click up like on this row, or even right here to select everything, as a guest, you'll still have this filter button, and you can click this filter button and click create temporary filter, and then you can do what I'm about to show you, which is that you can sort all of the columns however you want. So for example, if I want to sort this by faction and then sort it by advancement, now I can quickly look at what were the lists, who were the players, what were the records of people who advanced with droids. And then here were the main things that we saw about their list. So you're welcome to dive in like this to it as well. Empire, these were the Empire lists that advanced. It's a lot of Vader. Notice that the Vaders that did really well had the patrol lat. It's labeled as patrol and not lat because the formula that looks for AAT was finding lat. So I had to rename lat patrol craft patrol. So that's why that's like that. So 4 Vader players advancing, and one of them, 3 of them using patrol, and then this one being like a triple do list. And looking at clones, seeing what you can see, lots of clone balls. Did have somebody advancing with like Rex double ATRT, cool. And then the rebel lists, which were, you know, overwhelmingly, there's a lot of variety in the rebel list, which is great for them. That's really cool. And Maul. The other thing that you can do in this sheet is press Control F and search for things. So for example, like, oh, Ben didn't say anything about Krennic. Well, that's because you can see 1 of 2 times it pops up. Literally 2 people ran Krennic. So thank you for running Krennic. He's a cool dude. Unfortunately, you know, neither player advanced. Looks like red. What's the 7 mean in Leet speak? I can't remember. R37 Noob, sorry, I can't fully read your names intended, almost advanced. You know, he went 3-2. That's great. That's very respectable. With Krennic, double dues, double full scouts is what that is. So if you're thinking, you know, where's the X34s? Well, there were only 2 of them, and I think one of them advanced. Yeah. So Ryan ran it with the bus, and oh no, he advanced as well. So the 2 X34 lists both advanced. And I loved this one. This James Brett, whoever you are, went 5-0 with Han Lando double X34. Like, I'm there for that. I've never run it, but like the theory of that, it should be very good. So, okay, you've listened to me enough. You guys can go play in the data. I encourage you to play in the data. I'm gonna even take it away from you so you can't see it right now. Look around in it, share your observations in the comments, share your observations on Discord, in Facebook. The conversation is what we're looking for. And remember, we're looking for what can we learn from this going forward. And okay, one other thing. I'm sorry, I can't help myself. This round robin represents where the meta was in the past at this point. Even if you're looking at this the day that I post it, because already the Kashyyyk wave is available to us, and this didn't include the Kashyyyk wave. And according to the buzz is that we're getting points rebalanced like really soon, like maybe this week, even the week that I'm filming this. And I almost didn't film this, but I thought I think it's still worth it. I think to have this conversation, we can still learn from looking at this data about how to be better players, even though it's a meta of the past. Because what you can say is, what biases did I already have going in? What did I think was going to do really well? Did it do as well as I thought? What did I think was going to do poorly and actually did all right? And learn about ourselves. What false assumptions are we making when we're list building and when we're theory crafting and we're going into tournaments, so that we can do that less and be more accurate with not accurate with our biases, more accurate with the kind of our instincts about where things are at as we are preparing to go to tournaments and play our best, and all that good stuff. Okay, now I've said my bit. Now I'm done. Thank you for joining me again. Please comment. Please join in the conversation, and I look forward to seeing you at our next Meta Snapshot at some point in the future. Take care.